Here we have a NeXTstation turbo color that is running OpenStep 4.2, and as you can see it's currently installing WordPerfect from a floppy disk. This is running on a SCSI 2SD with an SD card that has 4 2GB partitions on it. So in this video I will show you how to set this all up and get going with a working system. Alright, things you need: a SCSI 2SD device with an SD card. The size doesn't really matter, but the pre-made images, they come in like 2GB sizes, so either get a 2GB card or not much more. If you don't want to waste the rest of the space, you can set them up as additional storage partitions if you like. One of those USB based SD card readers, or depending on what machine you use, you might already have one built in. Some 1.44 megabyte floppy disks. You need at least one to create a bootable floppy to install the operating system, and a few more to play around with to install other software. Of course, a floppy drive to write images to the floppies, and then a few pieces of software that I'm going to show you right after this. So, in order to build the SCSI 2SD, we need ourselves some settings in order to set up the devices. Now, this website here, and I will put a link to that in the description. It has one to download, and this is also the website that links you to a pre-made image of the operating system if you don't want to go through the installation process yourself. Now, once you have that, you will load that into the SCSI 2SD utility, and if you do happen to have dark mode turned on your Mac, if the Mac is what you're using for this, you have to go to light mode, because otherwise this will not display properly. But anyway, so I've gone ahead and loaded that XML file into the utility so you can see how it's configured, and it only has one device created at this point, which is set up as SCSI ID 3 and has a device size of 2 GB, so it will create a 2 GB device, hard drive if you will, on the SD card. The other ones are not enabled, but I will do that because I want to make use of the remaining space on that card. Now, there is some stuff in those settings that are not visible, and if you do decide to enable a second SCSI device, let's set this to 4 and pick auto here, so it's at the right offset, another 2 GB partition. If you do this, it will not work, because some of those hidden settings are not taken over from how this has been configured, and I'll show you what those are. So this is the configuration, what that looks like under the hood, and the settings that you want to look at are these ones here. Now, if you just enable another SCSI device, they will set, I believe, these two values that the NeXTstation will not like. So you have to essentially copy that from the first one that will set up correctly and just paste them into any further device that you decide to add and activate on the SCSI 2SD device. So look out for those. Only the first one, if you use that downloaded file, will be correct. You have to fix all the others and just set them to the same values, and then it will recognize those as hard drives properly. the way that I've seen this fail is it will try to initialize them as a 0 size hard drive, and that's obviously of no use. Now, in order to create installation media, there is a little site here, and I will also put the link in the description. You can download images for all of those boot floppies, and you can then simply use a tool like this one here, Etcher, to load the image and put it on that floppy drive that I showed you earlier, and that makes for a bootable installation disk, as well as using an image for a CD-ROM. So you obviously also need a CD-ROM, raw CD-ROM that you can burn that image to. One thing to be cautious about with these, they do have boot floppies in them as well, but they don't seem to work. I've tried it out, and it says here it's x86 and Motorola for the system architecture, which type of CPU it can use, but I don't think the boot floppies are essentially for the Motorola architecture, which is what I'm installing this on. So just be aware. But there's an alternative, and just pick the one for your architecture. So if you have the Motorola CPU Next hardware. A word of caution for using external CD-ROM drives, which will most likely be SCSI devices, and I'm using this Apple branded one. Do make sure that you don't have any conflicts in the SCSI IDs. This has a little selector here to do that, to select which ID on the SCSI bus the CD-ROM drive will have, and make sure there's no overlaps with the ones assigned to the individual devices on that you will have on the SD card. In order to install the operating system the old-fashioned way, I have here a boot floppy disk that will launch the installer, as well as an image burnt to CD-ROM of OpenStep 4.2, and so that will go into that external SCSI to SD CD-ROM drive, which is connected to the NeXTstation over here, and we'll boot it up. It should boot from the floppy, and I'll walk you through that process. Alright, so let's try this again with a different camera. Hopefully not as much of glare and refresh rate problems. So we'll start this again from scratch. Wait until the system tests have gone. Then we'll press Command tilde to launch the ROM monitor and instruct it to boot from the floppy disk instead of the built-in hard drive. Okay, so BFD for boot from floppy. Bad magic. That's interesting. Okay, so it found all the SCSI devices. Here's the CD-ROM. Okay, type 1 to use English. Yes, please. Startup disk in this computer is SCSI disk at target 0. We want to keep that. Type 1 to install OpenStep on this disk. Ready to install OpenStep. Type 1 to start installing OpenStep. Yes, please. And off we go. last time I tried to select specific packages here, it actually crashed on me, so I will not interfere with this and simply proceed with the installation. Alright, now that the installation is complete, we can restart the system and start to explore the operating system installation. Alright, here's the welcome screen asking us to configure some basic settings like language and type of keyboard, so we'll go ahead with US English. And here we are on the desktop. And we can have a brief look at the machine configuration. Running 33 MHz 6840 with 128 megabytes of RAM on a 2 GB disk. So now that the operating system is installed, let's take a look at how we can get other software on this. Okay, so now we're ready to start installing some software, and again the old-fashioned way. I'm trying to install WordPerfect, and I have a set of floppy disks where using the process I showed you earlier, using Etcher to put images on these. This is probably something you don't want to do every day, maybe just once for fun. Later on I'll show you how to create an image of the internal hard drive or SD card, so you can recreate that as needed without having to go through this probably painful process, especially if you want to install multiple packages. So let's insert the first floppy and get this process started. And there we have it. WordPerfect, word processing software for Next computers. One done, a few more to go. Now that we have a bunch of software installed, I pulled the SD card from the SCSI to SD device, and we'll plug it into this USB reader here, and I'll show you how to create a reusable image that you can put on additional cards later on. Have the SD card mounted, and it's the device down here under disk 2. We're ready to create an image file from it that we can reuse on other SD cards. This is actually a different SD card. I'm just using that for demonstration purposes, so ignore the Windows partition name down here. It's most likely that you will not see any mountable partitions on this at all. And so we are going to create the image from this device here, dev disk 2. Now, what we use for this is dd, and you have to use root access to it. The input file is dev disk 2, and then the output file is the name of the image. So we can say nextstep.img, and then it should proceed with creating a disk image off of whatever is on the SD card. It doesn't matter how it's formatted, it doesn't matter how many partitions you're on it. You should be able to then reuse that to put the image back on an SD card of a similar or larger size. It's creating the new image has finished, as you can see here. What I've done as well is I've used gzip to compress the image, and as you can see, this is the original size and this is the new one. It's shrunk quite a bit. Now, if you wanted to put this back on an SD card, make sure that you use the same SCSI2SD settings that you've used for the source card, and then you would simply uncompress the image and then simply use dd again, minus, and for input file you would use the uncompressed image, and output file is wherever the SD card is mounted at. So in this case, if it's again mounted at disk 2, then this is where you would write it to. Easy as that. And there we have a working NeXTStep or OpenStep system on the Turbo Color. Now, not everyone wants to use these cumbersome installation methods using like floppies and CD-ROMs. So once you have a system up and running with all the software that you want, I would definitely recommend creating these image files, and then it's simply a matter of copying them onto other SD cards as needed or for archival purposes. You can also use one of the links that I'll post in the description down below to get a pre-made operating system image, so you don't have to use this method here, which can take quite some time to put on an operating system. It goes a little bit faster, but robs you of the experience as it would have been back then. I hope this was useful, you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching.